small size is one of our strengths. We are allowed as professors to really get to know our students, because an average class size is about 8. The biggest I've ever had is 25 students in a class. So we have the luxury of spending a lot more time with each student. This is a great place to go to school.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to stand on my soapbox and give you some opinions about how I feel about the nature of energy in society today. The title of my talk has to do with the planet and profits, and the choices that we make in terms of those two things are very big in terms of polarizing our nation currently politically. And I want you to focus on the fact that eventually at the end of the talk we're going to get around to talking about stewardship, because I think we need to look at energy and the use of energy from that framework as a stewardship thing. And I'm going to come at this to give you a little more fuel for the fire, so to speak, in terms of why the nation is so polarized about energy and energy use. And then I'm going to quickly move on from that and give you a nice, good old-fashioned university lecture about what energy is and why we need it and where it comes from. And we'll break it down into renewable, non-renewable. Then I'm going to throw a bunch of facts and figures at you, first worldwide and then United States, and then I'm going to come to the concept of stewardship and then give you some pictures to remember at the end about what I mean about stewardship and choices that we make. So usually when you come to a talk about energy, you have controversy. So I was living in Corpus Christi at the time when the Deepwater Horizon disaster happened in April of 2010. I lived through that disaster ecologically, with the oil spill, etc. So this is the kind of thing that usually gets people's attention when we talk about energy and the use of energy and the dangers and or environmental impacts of energy. This is what we would consider a catastrophic type of event. Normally, most of the time, we don't have to deal with this kind of mess. So I want to but this is the type of thing that polarizes the world. So here's what happened. With the horizon, there were drilling setbacks, and that led to cut corners, always, because it's always about the bottom line, the money, right? There is governmental oversight in drilling, including offshore drilling. There was a failure in this case. What happened was we had a gas bubble, a natural gas bubble that blew past a valve that was malfunctioning, and that caused 2,000 gallons per minute to spill into the ocean. So it was a total of 4.9 million barrels, which means 230 million gallons, which is more than we can fathom, I think, in our mind, that went out into the ocean. It took them 86 days to fix it, which was another what was going on kind of a deal. And we consider it to be the largest accidental oil spill in history. This is the kind of thing that makes people pay attention to energy. It's unfortunate, because it takes these big disasters to capture our attention, but in reality, we need to get off of the big disasters and the catastrophes and look at the day-to-day issues. So when something like this happens, we get this. This is a quote from a textbook that I use when I teach environmental science. The citation for that book is listed below. But here's what we get. You have to reduce dependence on oil. You have to shift to clean, renewable energy sources. You have to do this. It's impacting our health, the health of us, the health of our planet. Fossil fuel combustion is evil. Okay? And economic importance to hit it where, again, because everybody thinks money talks, let's talk about the economic realities. All right? So we are in wars because we depend on foreign oil. So this is, to me, this is kind of a, from my perspective, in my opinion, this is an extreme statement. We have to radically change. The planet will die if we don't. This is a mandate. This kind of disaster proves it. Okay? So that's one side of the rhetoric. The other side, for which there is no explanation, goes like this. I took this from an article published by Bill McKibben, who at the time was at Middlebury. I think he's still at Middlebury, from the New Republic from October 6, 2010. Mark Rubio was attacking Charlie Crist because he was a believer in man-made global warming. And the idea is there's no scientific evidence to justify it. Okay? Climate is always changing. There's a modicum of truth in this, and the modicum of truth is the climate is always changing. Okay? And we have scientific evidence to prove that. And the reason why he knows the climate is changing is because we have scientific evidence to prove it. Yet, we obviously don't have scientific evidence to prove that there's any human involvement. Okay? Rhetoric. And Rush Limbaugh, I don't remember whose statement he was disputing, but, wrong. More carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not going to do anything greenhouse-wise. It's just not. It's all a hoax. It's all a lie. It's all made up. All right? Nobody understands this. From what Bill said in his article, and I agree with him, we've analyzed this from political aspect, economic aspect, big oil aspect, and no one can understand where this is coming from. It's not coming from supposedly one specific spot. So something like that oil spill, the largest accidental oil spill in history, it polarizes us. And we start to go into camps, and then we start to argue with each other about who's right and who's wrong, and that's all we care about. And then no one, it seems, at least on the surface, is working on solving the problems. When are we going to get down to stop pointing fingers, arguing with each other, and really talk about what's going on? Okay? So that's where I think we need to go. And that's where I hope to end up with in this talk. Okay? So let's talk about why we need energy. I'm a biologist, and so the thing that I say is life is only possible with energy. You cannot have life without it, because the natural order of the universe is towards entropy, and entropy is perfect disorder, randomness. Everything is equally distributed everywhere. And what you can't do if you're a living organism is have equal distribution of things everywhere. If you do that, it's called equilibrium, and in living organisms, equilibrium equals death. So the only thing that produces death is energy, or prevents death is energy. You need a constant input of energy. Our human societies are no different. If we're going to maintain complexity and order in our societies, we're going to have a constant input of energy. There is no way around it. We cannot not use energy. It's impossible. Okay? So energy is our only defense against entropy and the laws of the universe. So the universe is going towards entropy. We are trying not to do that. Interestingly enough, we'll get to this in just a minute, but we cause more entropy in the universe by being alive. So life sacrifices itself for the universe, or the universe sacrifices itself for us. So law 1 and law 2 has to do with thermodynamics. Law 1 is also called the law of conservation of energy. You all know this. We can't, in our universe, create energy. We can't destroy it. We have a finite, limited amount of energy available to us in our universe. It's a law. In science, we go from a hypothesis to a theory, and from a theory to a law. And when it's a law, there's nothing that can undo it. Okay? We can't disprove this, no matter how hard we tried and how many years. So we can't create energy. We can't make any more of it. We can't destroy it. But the thing that we can do is transform it or transfer it. So we can make changes in the energy, in the type or form of energy that we have or use. Law 2, the one that's unavoidable, is that's great. We can transform one type of energy into another, but every time we do that, we increase entropy somewhere in our universe. So as living organisms, our cells maintain their organization, their complexity by a constant input of energy, and in doing so somewhere else, the randomness increases. So it's a law. It's a natural law. It's just the way it is. So we have this need for energy, and we can use it biologically or from a society standpoint. Complexity is the name of the game, and in order to maintain that, sustain that, we need a constant input of energy. Okay, so we can talk about types of energy in a number of ways. There's potential energy and there's kinetic energy. We can also talk about forms of energy such as nuclear, electrical, solar, chemical, thermal, mechanical. 6 different forms. Those are the forms that we can transform from one form to another. Those are the only things that we as humans have to use for our sources of energy, whether it be for personal energy or societies, what am I trying to say? Our external, outside of our body, things that we need energy to maintain order with. So the other two types that we talk about that are kind of a hotbed politically are this idea of non-renewable energy sources and renewable energy sources. And again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I want to go in a certain direction with this. So the big polarization, it seems to me, in our society, even our global society today, is this competition between we need to stop relying on non-renewable sources of energy and we need to switch over to the bigger use of renewable sources of energy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So we have two major forms of non-renewable energy. One is fossil fuels and the second is nuclear energy. Including in fossil fuels is crude oil, natural gas, and coal, which is the large majority of the energy sources that we're using currently to fuel our human societies. The other source that's non-renewable is nuclear energy. This is because once you split the nucleus of an atom, you can't unsplit it. It's like frying an egg. You can fry an egg, you can take it out of the refrigerator, put it in the heat, and you can fry it, and it's going to change the clear egg white to a solid white, and it's going to change the yolk to a somewhat solid. If you put that egg back in the refrigerator, it's not going to go back to clear and mushy. It's stuck the way it is. So with nuclear energy, that's what we're talking about. Okay, we split the nucleus of the atom, we're done. It's over. So these are non-renewable sources. Anybody want to tell me why fossil fuels are non-renewable?
There's a limited supply.
Okay, why? Where does it come from? Anybody? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh no, like kind of like the old, like dinosaur bones. They got compressed. No.
Yeah. So what is now fossil fuel? It's literally from fossils. Fossils meaning mineralized living material. So all our fossil sources came from the carbon skeletons of what once were living organisms, trapped, compressed, heated for a long period of time. Anybody have any idea how long a period of time? How long ago did dinosaurs roam the earth? Millions of years. So when we say non-renewable, I mean we could go out on a limb and solve the death penalty crisis by burying prisoners and and smushing them and heating them and then waiting 75 million years and hoping that at some point we can then take the remains out by some form or another and then use them, but I wouldn't want to rely on that. So that's why we say it's non-renewable. Okay? It's also why this fuel puts out a lot of CO2 emissions, because whether or not you know this, you are an emitter of CO2. By using food energy, you put out all the carbons that were once in your food molecules now leave your body as CO2. Okay? So the fossil fuels, your biological fuel, it's just a natural consequence. When you burn wood, same thing, natural consequence. But the idea of living organisms and CO2, see the trade-off, the difference between burning wood and fossil fuel is that wood you can regrow, and the CO2 you put out in the atmosphere from burning the wood, you can put back into the new wood. Because that's what plants do. They take the CO2 out of the environment and they make organic materials from it. So it's cyclable. With fossil fuel, again, unless we put ourselves, new burial types of things, and put ourselves in to remake fossil fuels in 75 million years, we're not recycling that. So it's not a renewable source. Everybody good? Okay, here are the types that we consider to be renewable sources of energy. Again, this is what human society is trying to use more of. Biomass energy, which is like burning wood for fuel. Hydropower, solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, tidal and wave energy. Raise your hands if you believe these are green and clean. Nobody?
Sounds like a trick question.
It is a trick question. It's absolutely so. Everybody was smart. Then must be no. The answer must be no. I'm here to tell you there is no true clean or green energy source. It doesn't happen. We need to get over that. Okay? When it comes to stewardship, we need to make responsible choices, but we don't need to make them on choices that, oh, this is better for the environment, or it could be better. It might be greener. It might be cleaner. Okay? But in the long run, we are biological species that live on a planet that use the planet's resources just like every other biological species. Okay, we're going to have an effect on the planet. It's an inarguable thing. And there are over 7 billion of us, and it's projected to be 9 billion by 2020. I think. 2020, 2050, something. I'll have to check on it. So these are renewable energy sources, the things that we're trying to get better at using. And we're just beginning. I don't know why we haven't pushed longer for research on this. We should be a lot further ahead on this so that we can use them and so we can be cleaner, okay, a little bit anyway, with our energy source. So here's the controversial part of my talk. Energy use is neither green nor clean. And this is why. Fossil fuels, it's an easy one. We burn it, we put not only CO2 in our atmosphere, but other kinds of chemicals that are trapped within our sources of coal or crude oil, natural gas, etc. The water pollution thing, we're not talking about an oil spill. We're talking about the car that drips at the stoplight and onto the pavement, and then the rain comes, and then it goes into the rivers or the watersheds. Okay, it's going to happen. If we use this kind of fuel, that kind of stuff is going to happen. So water pollution happens everywhere there are roads or wherever people are using vehicles or motors that use fossil fuels. It's just going to happen. So that's what this water pollution means. The atmospheric deposition of combustion products, we're talking about, again, CO2, other kinds of sulfuric acid. It's the sulfur that's put out that can become sulfuric acid. Some of those are greenhouse gases. Does anybody need me to explain the concept of greenhouse gas? Okay, so that's causing more greenhouse gases, causes more temperature fluctuations in our environment at various points on our planet. Nuclear power, we know a lot more about this, and we were going in this direction for a long time. It's fallen a bit out of favor, just ask Japan. It's pretty good, except for the waste material is radioactive, and we don't know what to do with it. What do we do with radioactive material? There's only so many mountains to put it, and eventually, depending on what we're using, it'll be okay. It'll be not toxic anymore, but it's going to take longer than to make new oil. Okay, in many cases, so that's a problem. And then there's that tiny little risk, and it is small, of a very catastrophic event, like in Japan, with the radioactive wave that's coming to the West Coast or has arrived at the West Coast in the ocean. That was pretty huge. The Pacific Ocean is pretty big. And so there's a long-lasting effects of that. Okay, so that's not clean or green either. The biomass is the good old-fashioned wood and or plant products, including biofuels. The use of microorganisms to produce oils that we can then use to make products for our engines and etc. This is renewable, as I said, because it's plant and or living material. When we grow those plants or increase the number of that material, we can then take CO2 out of the atmosphere. When we burn it, put it back in, so it's a cycle. But it's only going to match CO2 for CO2 if we don't overharvest. Okay, so there's potential for overuse there, but again, if we're looking at this like even Steven, then it's not going to put any more greenhouse gas out there. However, what it does do for the soil is it removes nutrients. Because the one thing about living organisms is when we cut down the tree and burn it, all of those nutrients, that food, the nitrogen especially, and other things that's in that living material does not go back into the soil. Okay, it's now in our atmosphere, and so we deplete our soils, at least where we're growing the biomass. So we have to address that. How do we put the nutrients back into the soils after we harvest these materials? Okay, hydroelectric power, flooding one place, damming up another, reducing your flow, it changes habitat for wildlife. Okay, natural flooding cycles are disrupted. That can be a problem, especially in areas which depend on spring floodings for nutrient deposition. Like I'm thinking of the Nile, for example, where there's the Nile Delta, where a lot of flooding is what made that area so rich and green and great for growing crops. There's thermal pollution because the dams do increase the temperature of the water, and there are just species that have to either deal with that or leave or become extinct because of the increase in temperature. And then there's, in California, this is a big, huge problem. They're doing a lot of research on how to get the salmon back into their natural water supplies because of all the dams in California, because of all the use of water and misuse of water. I heard recently that somebody in California is actually shipping water to China. And they're in a drought. Anyway, so the damming, it can prevent organisms like salmon from getting back to their native environments. Solar energy, the problem is it's not reliable. It's not sunny everywhere. If you're going to do solar energy, I recommend being out west. where there's a majority of the days are sunny days. There are some downsides. Upfront expense is one. Something that's not a lot published. You need fossil fuels to build some of the equipment, and some of the photovoltaic stuff can be toxic if you have to dispose of it. But you know, again, if you're not going to dispose of it, because you don't change your solar panels like every 2 years when a new model comes to upgrade. You know, the solar panels. So the toxic part is less of a problem. Wind energy, intermittent, not available everywhere. It does require batteries, hydrogen fuel cells. Again, that's a toxic part of it. But if you're using them, I don't know how often they run out, that you have to renew them, but it's one of the parts that's a problem. Wind sources near population centers are difficult. I put in here in parentheses, have you ever been to Denver? Because if you've ever been to Denver in the springtime and tried to walk across the street from, you know, you go from the shelter of buildings and then you step out in the middle of the street where there's no buildings, you know, you're 3 blocks that way before you know what's going on. So, you know, downtown Denver would be a great place to put windmills on top of their buildings, maybe El Paso also. But you have to have wind for a windmill to work. There is a potential hazard to birds and bats. I've been hearing this for a long time. People in Corpus Christi, where there are now large windmill farms, were complaining about the seabirds, and they're going to fly into it, and it's going to drop the population. Birds and bats, people are smart, and there are many dangers that animals have evolved to avoid, and so this isn't going to be a long-term problem. Those species will realize and recognize that as an enemy, and will learn behaviors that recognize and avoid it. So it's not a long-term problem, and it's the Darwin effect. If a bat refuses to learn and hits the windmill, do you want it to reproduce anyway? So there is that, okay? A big thing here in Vermont, which surprises me, is it offends people's aesthetic sensibilities, and they don't want them just willy-nilly, they want them hidden. You can't hide a windmill out of the wind. So there is that people issue about the wind energy. Geothermal energy is a great idea if you live near a hot spring, like Yellowstone. Basically what this is groundwater that's heated, and then you can use that heat to generate energy sources that people can use. The problem is if you demand is too great, you'll drain the warm, hot water out of the source and won't replenish it fast enough, and so then you'll run out. So that's a problem. Geothermal activity shifts place from time to time. Not necessarily large shifts, but enough, depending on where your plant is and where it's pumping from. Salts and minerals can be corrosive to equipment over time, causing replacement. And then, again, geographically, there just aren't that many hot springs. So it's limited, like wind and solar, to time and place. Okay, 2 other types of energy that we're looking into, the ocean energy. This could be wave energy, tidal energies. There's all kinds of research going into this. It does require us to place devices in or on the ocean. There's this idea of underwater turbines that are a lot like windmills. The idea is the same like with the bird or bat thing. What will happen? Will there be, strikes? Remember the manatees. I don't know, I lived in Florida for a while. Manatees, no matter how many boats they've seen, they like the warmth, they still get propeller strikes. So it's the downside. And then the hydrogen, use of hydrogen as fuels. Germany already has buses that are fueled with hydrogen cells, and they've had them for a while now. We still have a lot of research to be done. The source of hydrogen is a problem because we get hydrogen from similar places like we get carbon, and we combust it, similarly to like we combust carbon-containing materials. So there is a danger, depending on what source we use, of greenhouse emissions. We need to solve that problem. The conversion from the kinds of fuel we use now to hydrogen would be huge, massive, and we know how much people love change. So it's gonna cost a fortune, and a lot of psychologists will be rich. And then the storage of hydrogen fuel in cells, we're not real good with that. There's leakage of that, and so that can deplete ozone. So this again, we need to do more work, more research before we can, even consider going down this path. Okay, quickly I want to run through some statistics.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that last bullet, I hadn't heard of that one before. How does that happen?
It's just when you store, because hydrogen fuel, the nice thing about it is you can store it. But apparently the storage devices that have been developed to date leak. I don't know.
So is it the hydrogen reacts with the ozone? Is that
Yes,
that's
up in
what's
yes.
happening?
So it reacts with it, creating water and or hydrogen peroxide, and therefore depletes the ozone itself.
Okay.
Yep. So now for the boring math part, statisticals. It's interesting amazing what you can find on the Department of Energy site, the Energy Information Administration site. If you're a conspiracy theorist, now's the time not to trust anything you see. For the next, here is a projection of world energy consumption through 2005. The vertical line to the middle of these bars is roughly where we are right now. The non-OECD, OECD is an acronym that means Organization for Economic and something development.
Cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you. Organization for Economic and Cooperation and Development. So non-OECD means those are countries that have not joined that organization, and the OECD ones are countries that have, and we are one of those countries in the OECD part. So you can see that in terms of total energy consumption, and these units are quadrillion British thermal units. Okay? So it means nothing, but it's big, a lot. Okay? It's just really a lot, more than a ton. And I don't know if it's more than a gazillion or a bazillion, but it's large, a lot. So from now until 2040, it looks like the non-OECD countries are projected to increase their fuel consumption much more than the OECD countries.
So
Now,
what
yes.
countries are OECD?
I'm just so the United States, Canada, Mexico, Chile are in it. Europe mostly is in it. I don't know the specific European countries, and it would take a half hour to list them all. Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand are in it. Brazil and some other, no, not Brazil.
China?
No, China's not in this. Nope.
China and India are probably the two.
China and India are in the non-OECD for sure.
So the proportion of non-OECD is growing.
Absolutely. So that means the proportion of consumption of energy in those units is going to grow, projected to. All things, nothing changing at this point in time.
There is a little good news in there though, because it looks like the OECD
We're getting
countries
better.
got the memo.
Yeah. If you ignore the United States and somewhat in Europe, but we'll get to that. But yeah,
But there's more people in the non-OECD countries consuming more energy.
yes. There are 4.5 times more Chinese than Americans. There are 4 times more Indians than Americans. So the potential for abuse is much bigger.
Yeah,
Dave?
it's exacerbated by the fact that they probably haven't produced proportionally or used up proportionally more energy in the past, but they're going to now.
But per
Even
capita,
China, yeah, because
but
of development.
per capita, we're still the worst.
Yeah,
Of all the countries, groups in in the whole world, per capita, we consume more energy than anybody, hands down, per person.
So what happens when they consume as much as we do?
The world explodes.
So I really didn't want to cause mass suicide at this particular junction. But this is why we get that one side of the argument that says hurry up and do something. If America's going to be a true world leader again, it's not going to be warfare, it's going to be this. If we can pave the way, I guarantee you, if we can show a market for a better, smarter use of energy, the rest of the world will follow. Europe is ahead of us in this. So if we can follow their lead and together, we in Europe, if we can show a better way to use energy, then we can save the Earth. I have no doubts. But we can't do it overnight. It would be like stopping an aircraft carrier fully loaded with personnel and equipment, going full out, expecting it to stop, full stop, in 1,000 yards. It can't be done. It just can't be done. So here we are, total world energy consumption by type of energy source. So the darker of the light blues is liquids like petroleum products and liquefied natural gases. Liquid petroleum. Natural gas is the gas part. Coal is green, nuclear is purple, and other is all the renewables is in the category of other. So that would include everything. Hydroelectric, solar, wind, biomass, that's all in that other category. The OECD Americas, again, that's United States, Canada, Mexico, and Chile. Okay? The OECD Europe, I don't have a breakdown of countries. It was not provided on the site, the one thing. OECD Asia is Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. Europe, Eurasia, that's Russia and other. I don't know. Asia is mostly India, China, and other. Middle East, just one category. Africa is one category. And Central and South America, everything that's not Chile is broken into Brazil and other. So the coal in China, that green bar, that's their coal usage. In 2010. Yes.
Is that because it's cheaper and more available in Asia?
They can get their hands on it more cheaply, yes. I'm not sure if it's available in Asia necessarily, but I know they're using their own and importing both.
But mostly using their own.
I don't know the answer to that, if it's
They're
mostly.
importing
I
from
would
us
think so.
now, too.
Yeah, they're importing from us too. Yeah, we're exporting to them. So they're using as much as they get their hands on.
Because it all comes down to money, right?
It's cheap. It's easy. And what do they care what they do to the air?
Right.
Right. But we're never going to get them to look at it any other way if we keep looking down our nose at them and do what we want to do when we're telling them not to do what they want to do.
So there isn't really a lot of other there.
No. Nope. Mostly in the terms of the coal. And you'll be surprised we'll break this down by more specifically by type and by region, and you'll be surprised how little India is using, surprisingly enough. So here we have, this is liquids consumption. This is million barrels a day, and this is by region. So USA is over there on the left. China's somewhere in the middle. Europe is the next highest bar as to us. Look at China is in the middle. It's the third highest bar, and right next to it to the right is India. And this is liquid. So this is petroleum, million barrels a day, and liquefied natural gases.
Is this just for energy, electricity generation, or is this all energy usage?
The best definition I could find is this is all energy consumption.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And last
In
I read,
2010.
transportation energy is about 37%.
I'll show. I only have a graph for that for us in terms of where transportation is, because what we'll see is that's what's driving our overuse. Here we are in natural gas consumption. This is a different. This is trillion cubic feet. It means nothing, so everything's just kind of relative. USA and Europe again are the biggest. Notice China is not using a lot of natural gas. Sorry.
Your charts are showing you cubic feet and barrels and all that.
I'll normalize that at the end. I'll show you all in one unit.
Well, but then that doesn't show you per person.
No. None of this is per capita.
Right. So you have these tiny little countries here that can't possibly use as much as China. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, but China's not even using as much as China could.
Right.
For this, per capita, considering the person. So per capita, the United States would still be using way more because they're right, and then the same in barrels of liquids.
Right.
We're the highest bar, therefore, and we have only the third largest population, and we're only third largest by a huge margin because India has 1.2 billion people and China has almost 1.5 billion people at this point. So the numbers are, you divide it by them, and they're going to be using this much, and we're going to be using that much. Coal, China. We're not doing too good. India's almost caught up to Europe. Not doing too good. That was great for a college professor. Nuclear energy. Europe uses more nuclear. We're second. Japan was coming up there. I don't think they'll probably go in that direction for a while, or they'll change strategies about that. Russia's doing a little bit. South Korea, not a whole lot. This is the renewable. This is all that stuff together. All the hydroelectric, solar, wind, biomass, all that together. Europe is way ahead of us. China's way ahead of us. Again, per capita, China's still not as much per capita, but in terms of total energy use, they're ahead of us. Brazil, look at Brazil. I thought that was interesting. Brazil is doing a better job. Okay, here it is. Total world energy consumption in quadrillion British thermal units. So this is all those previous graphs I showed you together, all in the same units, all with the same countries. If you normalize this to per capita, and we have only 320 million people, and China has 1.5 billion people, the per capita thing is going to be huge difference. Ginormous difference. Very big. Okay, now we're going to compare 2010 with 2013. 2010 being blue, 2013 being red. China jumped. We did a little better. Between 2010 and 2013, China jumped up. Middle East went up, Europe went down a smidge, Japan went down a smidge. Again, some of us are trying, we're doing something. It's not a lot, but we're going in the right direction. It seems. Yes, James.
Do you think we did better based on policy and changes, or just that our economy has been so poor during that period?
That's a good question. I don't know that's an answerable question. I don't know of any data. I didn't look for that. It could be a combination of both, which it almost always is. However, looking at the way people drive their cars, I'm not sure that part of it is economy driven at all. And how much it cost us. I mean, we were convinced that the rising price of gas would cause us all to stay home more. I'm not seeing it. Okay, let's put this into perspective. Every year around the world, the amount of energy used from renewable sources increases by about 2.5%. Okay? And it's projected to continue to do that. But 35 years from now, we're still going to be using 80% of total energy consumption is going to be fossil fuels. Even with that statistic, even with an increase in renewable sources, we're still going to be, the world is still going to be about that dependent on fossil fuels. So we're doing it and we're getting it there, but maybe not. I'm going to switch now from the world to the United States. This is a comparison between 4 years in the United States of types of energy consumption. Now on the x-axis we have types of energy: coal, natural gas, petroleum, nuclear, hydroelectric, geothermal, etc. 1949 to 2012. Okay? Look at the petroleum increase from 49 to 2012. Huge jump. And that's 1973 when we were in the first energy crisis. We didn't learn anything. We learned nothing. Okay? So it's hard to see it, but geothermal solar is there. It's just so small that it hardly registers as a blip in 2012. Nuclear didn't show up till 1973 because it's actually, there's some there in 1957, but it's like 0.000211 quadrillion BTUs. So, but this is how the United States is doing. The first 3 are fossil fuels. The first 4 are non-renewable. We're not doing a good enough job. Another perspective. In the United States, the population in 2012 was 182% of what it was in 1957. However, our energy consumption compared between the two was 227%. So our population growth is not explaining our energy consumption. We're overpacing our population growth. Here was a scary statistic I ran across. In 1949, fuel economy, all vehicles, this includes trucks, commercial vehicles, everything that uses liquid. In 1949, the fuel economy was 13.1 miles per gallon. In 2012, it was only 17.6. That's ridiculous. I mean, the passenger cars did well, right? We're up to about 22 or 23, but again, we're not there yet, right? We still have a lot of work to do.
You know if that includes rail?
No, it does not. It's on the road vehicles. Although I say that, but I don't think it includes engines that burn fuel. I got the idea it was over the road. All right, now here's another projection, United States only. Done a little bit nice like wave parts. The different colors represent different types of fuel. So the blue is natural gas. The green is renewable. The olive green is coal. Then we have nuclear. Then we have liquid biofuels, which is just coming on. And then we have petroleum and other liquids. This is projection. All the way out to the right is 2040. Okay? Fossil fuel, purple. Fossil fuel, olive. Fossil fuel, blue. In 2040, we're really not making much progress. Projections, again, based on current use, current tactics, current behaviors. breaking this up into types. There are 4 types that I could find. Green is industrial, blue is transportation, olive is residential, purple is commercial. So residential means in your home. Fuel, oil, whatever you use to consume produce electricity. The transportation is the scary part. That's what we're going to the gas pump and putting in our cars. And other types of non-industrial types of transportations. We're not making any headway. Industrial is going to climb. So these are the 2, in my opinion, these are the 2 sources where we need to do the most change in terms of what kinds of energies we can choose or have choices for, are those types. Transportation and industrial. That's where we really need to hit our attitudes, our mindset about how we use energy and what kinds we use. So this brings me to my concept of stewardship. And here's the definition of stewardship from the dictionary.reference.com. The responsible overseeing and protection of something we care about. Responsible oversight. Something we care about, worth preserving. If we agree that our planet is worth caring for and preserving, then stewardship is how we need to view our use of energy. The choices that we make, the capabilities that we have, the kinds of technologies we have. We're the only species on this planet capable of this. We're the only ones that can have oversight and care and protect this planet. The only ones. So it's up to us. If we don't come through, everything dies on the planet. We won't need to wait for the sun to blow up. Okay? So it's not something you can regulate by government. It's not something that you can do by declaring a global policy. This is something we need to change in terms of, the popular political saying in terms of the war in the Middle East, changing the hearts and minds. That applies to this. We need to change our own hearts and minds and put our money where our beliefs are. If there's a product that's not on the market that we believe should be on the market, why buy an alternative? Why settle? Why not buy something? To force the market to go in the direction we want to go. Okay? That's what I think our attitudes need to change. So three more graphics. This is an American family, typical, and this was in 2010. This just kind of shows a typical American family home. It's modest, okay? And some of the stuff that would be in that home, it's definitely not all of it, but some of the stuff. And the statistics are that for this family to survive, their average income is about $46,900. It takes 31.00 square meters of land for those of you that are acre type people. This is 7.66 acres. It takes to give them all the stuff they need. All right? And this family emits 19.0 metric tons of CO2 every year by doing whatever it does, by using electricity, by burning gas, fuel oil, air conditioning, whatever. Okay? Products that it purchases, that's what they're emitting. Compare that to India. I know it's kind of an unfair comparison, but because there's always a happy middle, right? But let's look at India. Here's a family of 6. Average income, $2,960. They only need 0.69 acres of land to survive, and they emit 17 times less CO2 per family than we do. Now, the previous slide was an average middle income, doesn't really exist family. Okay? 17 times less. So the kinds of decisions we need to make are lifestyle decisions. What are we going to buy? How are we going to put our money? How does what we buy affect sources of energy, pollution, all that stuff? That's where we need to go. The argument about this is we have to do this drastically and we need to ignore this, all that stuff needs to go out. We need to think of ourselves as stewards of this one planet. That's all we got. Our grandkids, our great-grandkids are trusting us to do the right thing. We need to take steps. And we can do that in a society driven by global economies. We can do that by what we buy, when we buy it, how often we buy it, what we use. We can do that. We can absolutely change that. Polyester, vinyl, all made with petroleum. All of it. So let's look at this. It's a typical apartment. All of those things that are being pointed to are made with petroleum. So in that use of petroleum as fuel and consumption, this is included. shower curtain, the asphalt on the road, the components of the bicycle, a lot of the stuff in your TV, your stove, your blender, your dishware, parafilms, waxes, heating oil, vinyl, plastic, it's all going into the same coffer. That doesn't mean that everybody should run out and throw away all their plastic and get a composting toilet and have no running water and only use electricity 5 hours a day. Okay, there's none of that. I mean, there's some people out there that would want us to do that, you know, for a while. I'm not in favor of that, but we can make some changes. We can buy products when we need to replace something. Natural fibers, natural substances, wood, having a good old-fashioned glass, wood. I'd love to shut down every water bottling plant in the world. Plastic water bottles, just all of that. The waste of water, the fact that when you test the water, it's no better than what comes out of your tap. And those of us that live in rural communities have well water, put a filter on it. A renewable, reusable, cleanable filter. They're out there, the technology exists. So the moral of my story is this: we need to become stewards. We need to look at our energy consumption and use, not in a political or economically driven thing. We don't care about profits as much as we care about our planet. And let's show the world, change the world by what we buy and how we use energy, what kinds we purchase, and why we purchase it. And keep in mind that nothing is green or clean. We're going to affect the planet. But can we affect it in such a manner that it's not going to not recuperate? Can we affect it in a manner in which the planet has time to recover? Because nature is really wonderful about that. If we don't put in waste into our planet, it can deal with it, and it can clean it up, and it can provide for us a very nice, healthy environment. Thank you. I went a little long, as I normally do. Any questions? More questions?
Well, I had a specific, back to, you were talking about wind and how the birds and the bats will adjust eventually. Now, the sources that I've read have said that long before they'll ever adjust, there won't be any left. That it took millions of years for migratory patterns of birds to develop and evolve the way they are today, and it was okay because the changes occurred slowly. But the changes are occurring so fast today, and we're doing these things so rapidly that there isn't time enough to adjust. So
I'll give you that with the migratory birds. That's an absolutely very valid point. Because you just have to, where the windmills go, you can't put them in just anything. And there's been some studies about migration patterns. So you're exactly right about that.
Okay.
So you just need to keep them out of the path of the major migratory routes. That's definitely a valid point. So that is a problem. And you're right. Slow is better for evolution.
So as long as I'm asking that question,
Yeah.
More recently I have heard that some birds are attracted to solar panels thinking that they are landing on water because of the way they're set up, and if they were positioned properly, that maybe that wouldn't happen, but if they're not, that could be a big problem. Do you know anything? Have you seen anything?
No, I have not heard
about
about that, but that doesn't surprise me. And I'm also surprised that they wouldn't be drawn to heat sources, because I've seen birds land on grills because of the smell and the heat, and they'll burn themselves. So it does not surprise me that will happen. But I think we're smart enough to get to the point where we can prevent that kind of thing from happening. Hopefully I'm counting on us being smart enough to solve those kind of problems for sure.
Those problems need to be resolved.
And the migratory birds, however, are not a problem everywhere, because not everywhere has migratory bird problems. But that raises a point. I wonder if that's true for the migration of the monarch butterflies. Yes.
I have very little faith in a domestic energy policy that all of us will embrace, just because there's too much money in it, I think. But would you entertain the fact of maybe, or speak a little bit about maybe teaching kids to live a simpler lifestyle? I mean, we can't go back from where we're at right now. Right now, toothbrushes and all the stuff that's in our apartments, but I mean, is it...
We can change it, though, over time.
Yeah, I mean, but teaching kids to maybe live in the woods, in a smaller place, light a wood fire instead of, firing up the stove, something like that.
So it starts at home, which is why the people who earn the money need to spend the money wisely, and I agree with you. A political policy will never work. It's got to be grassroots, truly grassroots. So it starts at home. But you're never going to take people out of the cities. So you have to figure out how to do it there as well. But it's all got to be about showing people that it can happen, and it all starts with people who are willing to educate themselves and learn and see by example that it's not as painful to change as we might think. And then we just gradually get more people on board. I don't know any other way that's going to work except by example. I just don't. There's no way we can legalize it, or what would we do with offenders? Put them in jail? What jail? So that's not going to work. But we just have to put pressure on how we responsible spending of our money and not settle for things in, that disposable types of stuff. We need to become a non-disposable type of society. And if that means we don't order takeout, or if it means that a takeout restaurant allows us to bring our own pots and pans and put it in that and take it home and then wash it in, that's how it used to work when my parents, back in the dark ages, when my parents had takeout, they would go to the back door of a restaurant and they would fill the pot up and then take that home. I mean, I think that's a great idea. So something like that, it's going to take that, not buying plastic silverware. Stuff like that. Sounds stupid, but I think it's the only way to make it work. Dave.
Rebekah, you touched on global warming.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
My bad.
I was listening. I don't remember the program. I don't remember the name of the person. I think I came in the middle of it. But there was a person speaking about global warming, and he claimed it was too late for any sort of, long-term measures to take effect at this point, that we've waited too long. And he didn't paint a very pretty picture of the next 20 years. But he said that given what's going to happen over the next couple of decades, is going to be increasing pressure for a quick fix. And he mentioned something that there's an idea that you could inject something into I thought he said sulfur, but that didn't make sense to me at all, but into the atmosphere to not reverse, but at least slow down.
So are you talking about carbons? I can't say this word. Carbon sequestration? Yeah. So, there's been all kinds of, they want to put a big bubble of carbon in the bottom of the ocean, which is, there's wildlife down there too. So 2 points. One, we don't have any good research data that says any of that stuff is going to work or influence it. Two, the change of the planet. The global climate change. Okay, it is a scientific fact that our climate goes in cycles. That's why we have ice ages and then non-ice ages. It happens. It's true we're in another cycle change. It's also true that the magnitude of our changes and the rapidity with which they happen are increasingly larger in magnitude and shorter in duration. So we're cycling faster. And that's the target in terms of climate change that's what we need to look at. But the fact is this. We've changed the planet. We're going to change the planet. It's changed. We need to deal with it. We hate change. It's changed. We are not going to have a planet we had before. The coral reefs are going to change. They're going to change their placement. The corals are going to go naked. And they're going to swim in the ocean and they're going to find somewhere else that they can tolerate. And it may not be good for tourism, wherever they wind up. So it's going to change. And it will change. However, we stop what we're doing and or change our behaviors and decrease the kinds of things we're doing to our planet and allow it some time to recover, those changes will be less offensive, I guess, and then our great-grandkids aren't going to know any different anyway, and so that's just the world they're going to be in, and then if we can get them to try to change it less. But I'm not sure that it's irreversible change. From a biological standpoint, we can't predict that these climate changes will push evolution in one direction, and then if we change the climate again, that it will go back the way it was. I can't guarantee that. But it'll be different. But it's just about allowing the planet some room to breathe and survive, prolonged, and not run out of energy. The predictions, by the way, are that we've used this. And by the way, many people have tried to put a number on this. The best statistics I've heard or read, is we think we've used roughly 50% of all available fossil fuels to right now. So there's only half left. So I don't know if that's accurate or how accurate that is, but everybody's trying to guess how much time do we have on the fossil fuel clock. I don't think we know. I don't think we can know. And we can't get it all out either. Not with any methods that we have. Even fracking leaves stuff behind.
my fear is even if the quick, like you said, there's not a lot of scientific data on this quick fix, and this person wasn't advocating it, he was thinking it was a bad idea, but, you know, political and economic forces, we often do things that aren't wise, as quick fixes.
Knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
About my, yeah. My analogy of the my analogy of the aircraft carrier. If you could get it to stop from full steam in 1,000 yards, think of what would happen to that carrier, and the havoc and chaos and wreck that it would be. So no, I don't ever think putting on the brakes suddenly is ever a good idea. We just have to deal with the fact that we've done this, and let's just fix it, and stop arguing with each other about whose fault it is. Just fix it. Yes.
Well, I mean, I think that the concept is what absolutely needs to happen. If you have the conversations, though, people don't believe it.
Well, because the press coverage we get says that there's debate out there. It's like, it reminds me of the good old days when evolution was the bad guy, and the debate was, that's not really what happens. Evolution doesn't happen. It's a hoax. It's just, you know, now thank God we have the energy crisis and people have left evolution alone. But it's that same kind of thing. How do you get everybody on board? You're not going to until somebody, an element makes a change and they see the results. Then people will believe it. We're skeptics by nature and we hate change. And where everybody's afraid that that break is going to go on and I'm going to have to not have running water, no electricity after 8 p.m. and a composting toilet. Everybody's scared about it. That's what they want. That's what they want to take away my stuff. You know, it's a panic. Yes.
Yeah, there's no question we're using too many things that we don't really need. We should think about what we purchase. Right, you know, you showed the family in the U.S. with all their stuff, and I pretty much have all that stuff.
We all do.
And we all do. And then you showed the family in India.
Which it's an unfair comparison.
It's an unfair comparison because they have, 4 children there. I have no doubt that those parents are looking at their kids going, I want my kid to go to college and whatever.
These people want that.
Right.
Yeah.
They all do.
Yep.
And
everybody in China wants that.
But the way our economic systems are set up, that Indian family has to produce more, use more, make more money, so they can send their kids to college. And regardless of how you define a standard of living, but give them some of the things the rest of the world has. I don't mean all the junk, but
No.
opportunities for education, good food, whatever. And how do you balance that?
Yeah, so that's an unanswerable question.
Right.
I can only answer it from our side, the overusing side, right? You could say that these people are underusing. I don't know if that's the right term or not.
Right.
But if we overuse less, that allows them more opportunities. I don't know how that works economically.
Right.
Because if we buy less, but we can't continue to be at disposal. So we've got to find a way. So maybe we pay more for less,
Right.
which we hate, right?
Right.
So a table made out of wood costs more than one out of plastic, right? But it's better to buy the one out of wood.
Right.
So you know, there's a way to do this. I don't, you know, I'm not some. But here's the other point I should have made. The problem-solving part of this is going to take every part of our society, not just scientists, not just economists, definitely not politicians. You know, we need education leaders. It's going to take sociologists, anthropologists. It's going to take everybody working together, everybody. But so far, all we're doing is blaming, and nobody's solving. At least not in large enough quantities.
Well, it has to be everybody in the whole world because
We have to depend on ourselves to form these working groups and create solutions. We can't depend on governments anymore, or corporations. No offense. But it just, because maybe this is probably the exception, Greenmount, but you know, the point is, but we can't depend on, what my point is we can't depend on somebody else to do it for us. We have to make sure it gets done, right?